Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Trucking Joe for sending in some awesome pictures of his Armageddon Steel Legion. We've got a Chimera and we've got almost half a dozen Sentinels. All of these units look absolutely fantastic. Really like the sort of smoky grey effect on top of the tan. It just looks absolutely fantastic. So thanks for these pictures in, Trucking Joe. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, then please send them into my Facebook page or my email address, and you can find a link for both down in the description below. I also want to say a huge thank you to Trucking Joe for being a channel member. It really makes a huge difference, and if you're interested in becoming a channel member and going the extra mile, then you can click on the join button next to the subscribe button on this video, or you can become a channel Patreon supporter. But without further ado, let's get into today's video. So today, guys, it's very appropriate that we've got some Steel Legion pictures because we are going to be talking Chimeras. Now, we've been doing a few of these videos recently. Is Lehman Russ so-and-so back on the menu? Are Astropaths back on the menu? All this kind of stuff. But we're doing a similar style video today, which is, are Chimeras back in business? Are they back on the menu? Is it the triumphant return of mechanized warfare for the Imperial Guard? Now, I am starting to believe that mech warfare is going to be the way to go. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. Some of them are current reasons, some of them are reasons that are going to be coming up in the future with some changes that GW are making to the state of the game. So the first thing I want to talk about is, let's do this in the reverse order. Let's talk about those latter parts, because if I don't talk about what's coming up, then I'll forget about it, and then that'll be terrible. So essentially, guys, there is some changes coming to the way that armies get CP, command points. Now, GW, ever since they introduced command points in 8th edition, have constantly played around with this, and they've tweaked it, and they've used it as a way not only to try and balance the game, but to keep list building ideas fresh, and to keep the meta fresh and all that kind of stuff. And yes, it can be frustrating. Like at the beginning of 8th, we're rewarded for taking more detachments, and Guard were able to play that game, and now in 9th we are not rewarded for taking more detachments. Well, from what I understand, CP is going to be changing fundamentally again, and GW have announced this as well. And this is a whole video on its own, so we won't go into too much detail here. We'll just do a little bit of a heads up. But from what I understand is players are going to, in the next balance patch, players are going to be starting with 6 CP rather than 12. Now, you will gain 1 a player turn. Rather than 1 a battle round, you'll gain 1 a player turn. So you gain 1 at the start of your turn, 1 at the start of your opponent's turn. So you get a faster trickle. But the issue here is that if you're starting with less CP, you can afford less detachments. Now, that is a problem for infantry-style warfare, because infantry-style warfare tends to want to have lots and lots of troop choices. I mean, the standard way that I've been building my infantry armies since the beginning of 8th edition has been 3 battalions. And now that is going to be really tricky to do if I bring 3 battalions, I'm going to not have any CP to start with. So, why does this factor into mechanized warfare? Why does this make the Chimera back in business? Because rather than running multiple detachments maxed out of infantry, I've been trying out lists, in sort of preparation for this, I've been trying out lists where I just run 1 detachment, a standard single battalion. But instead of running my requisite, 120 infantry that I'd normally run in a multiple detachment guard army, I run 6 squads of infantry, and then instead of running another 6 squads of infantry, I run 6 Chimeras. And I've been really hammering my Steel Legion recently. And what's really interesting is I've been having a lot of success with it. Now, I'm not going to give any spoilers for you guys, but I've got a number of battle reports coming out recently, over the next month, and I've used my Steel Legion in about half of those reports. And in 3 out of the 4 battle reports I've got filmed up, I have actually used Chimeras. So, in all of those cases, the Chimeras were really, really valuable assets. In fact, if you watch the last battle report, and I'll link it at the end of this video, where I used my Steel Legion, I took on AdMech. Now, AdMech have obviously had their ups and downs, but they're still a solid enough army. They're just not top tier competitive or anything like that. But, at the very least, they're in the same ballpark as Guard, right? And spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear this, put a bucket on your head and bang a spoon next to it. But my Steel Legion absolutely smashed the Adeptus Mechanicus to the point where the Admech player conceded turn 4. End of turn 4, he went, right, no point playing turn 5, I concede, you win. And so that was, I didn't think that list was going to do that. I've been, you know, if you see me use my Chimeras back in like LGT, back in, you know, back end of last year, it was like mech warfare wasn't really where it's at. Now, I'm starting to think that mechanized warfare is going to make a comeback for a number of reasons. Firstly, armor overload has always been a pretty viable tactic. It's always been pretty viable. But it's even more so now because I'm finding, if I look back over the last few armies that I've faced, the last 2 tournaments I've been to, I can count on one hand the number of players that I would say brought sufficient anti-tank. Everyone's bringing anti-infantry for days, bro. Everyone their mum's packing anti-infantry. But not everyone is packing anti-tank. And when I think back at what is left on the board at the end of all of my games over the last 12 months, increasingly so, what's left on the board? My infantry gets slaughtered and my tanks are on the board. My tanks are being durable. And how does this keep happening? Well, you know, I should have probably picked up on this earlier, but what I've realised is people are so used to facing elite infantry, so used to facing just heavy amounts of infantry or elite infantry or stuff like that, that they're not so used to facing huge amounts of heavy armour. And a really key sort of example with this was Crusher Stampede. Crusher Stampede obviously doesn't use vehicles, but it does use big monsters. And a lot of people kept getting smashed by Crusher Stampede, partly because it was a very, very powerful list, but also partly because it was essentially the equivalent of bringing a tank company for the Tyranids. And then everyone started getting used to people bringing Crusher Stampede, and the anti-tank went up a little bit, and that was like the case for like a month. But now we're looking at the meta being much more infantry focused. So this is what I'm talking about. People, you know, we're talking about things that are around, not necessarily like game rules and that, but or what's coming in the future. You know, but we're talking about what's coming in the future is people. You know, the tactics are changing, and the meta is shifting to be more about dealing with infantry. Think of your top Eldar lists. No one's bringing Wave Serpent spam anymore. I mean, I might be, you know, talking out my ass here, but no one's bringing Wave Serpent spam anymore. It's all about Wailing Doom. It's all about how many bloody shurikens you can spit out in a turn. You know, think about all the different sort of armies that you face out there, and like, you know, even when you face like a marine army, that, you know, typically what people are bringing is like, oh, I've got my single unit of Hellblasters. It's like, okay, great, you've got a unit of Hellblasters. If I kill them, you don't really have a way of interacting with my armor. And we saw it again with, you know, and I don't want to keep using lots of examples. I want to, you know, keep this video short, focus on point. But, you know, we had a video recently where a Marauder bomber smashed everything that came across because no one was expecting to face that level of armour. Now, why does this all link back to the Chimera? Well, this comes down to now, so we've talked about the nebula stuff, we've talked about upcoming potential changes, we've talked about the general meta, but that's obviously always a little bit different and a little bit local, so it can be difficult to pin down. Now let's get down and deep dive focus on the Chimera itself, not just the environment that it finds itself in. The Chimera itself is actually relatively still a really cheap transport. Of course, you know, I'm sure someone will be able to point to a cheaper option out there. But when it comes to the Guard, you will struggle to find a cheaper transport. I mean, the Taurox is, I don't know off the top of my head, but Taurox is like 80, 90 points. Taurox Prime's like 120 points if you want to run it with, you know, a Gatling gun. Like, those are actually quite expensive. Whereas a Chimera, you can take a metal box for as little as 75 points. You stick a heavy bolter or a heavy flamer on the hull, and you take a multi-laser on the turret, and you've got a box for 75 points. And that's actually really, really cheap. You know, we're looking back over other editions. Back in like 5th edition, you know, this was the last time Chimeras were pretty cheap. Chimeras used to be about 55 points in 5th edition, and now, you know, God knows how many years later, they're only 20 points more. So, but the crazy thing is, in 5th edition, we only used to play like 1,500 point games. We only used to play like 1,750 point games. Now we play 2,000 point games. So, in terms of the extra points that we've gained for our lists, the Chimeras almost haven't gone up in value, like relatively. It's kind of a crazy way of thinking about it, but they're as cheap as they ever have been. And what has always been a problem for the Chimera is that They have decent levels of firepower, but they struggle to actually damage anything because their ballistic skills are a bit crap, and they don't have any guns really above strength 5, strength 6, right? Well, guess what? That doesn't matter anymore. For a simple reason, Hammer of the Emperor. Hammer of the Emperor is absolutely fantastic for Chimeras. And I'm not just saying this from a statistical point of view. I'm saying this with 3 games under my belt now, with spamming Chimeras, and they have consistently punched above their weight. When I used to run Chimeras, I literally didn't take their firepower into account. I didn't take them into account. I thought the only things that are going to kill stuff in this army are my tank commanders and my Leman Russes or my Manticores, whichever one I'm taking. Now it's like I can reliably use my Chimeras to do good chip damage to my opponents. Not just, oh, it's a bit of spare firepower, it's good chip damage. And the reason is that a Chimera actually puts out a relatively high amount of firepower in a really cheap package. So if we take, for example, your standard Chimera, it's got a mortar laser and it's got a heavy bolter. Let's say we go nuts and we spend 3 points on a storm bolter on top. Okay, or you could even go 5 points for the heavy stubber. It's dealer's choice. But let's say we spend 3 points. It's still under 80 points, right? You've then got a transport. Now, assuming you've got a squad inside. Now, this squad could be a full infantry squad for 60 points. Or it could be a 15, 20 point commissar or platoon commander. It doesn't matter. As long as you've got 1 unit in there, it gets to shoot the lasgun arrays. Okay. Now, what's so good about lasgun arrays? Well, we all know that lasguns have been melting tanks recently because of Hammer of the Emperor. Well, the Chimera comes with 6 of them. Now, back in the day, these were terrible, but now they're great because of Hammer of the Emperor. You don't care about AP. You don't care about, anything else. You just care about forcing as many wounds as possible and finding that pressure point in the game and breaking it. And Chimeras can do that for very, very cheap. Let's add up the number of shots that a Chimera gets. At long range, you're looking at 3 for the multi-laser, and the multi-laser is now the way you want to go, guys. It used to be all about that double heavy bolter. Now, you want to be digging out some multi-laser turrets, because again, you don't care about AP. Why don't you care about AP? Because of Armour of Contempt. So now you can save 10 points, keep the multi-laser, and whenever you come across those requisite Death Guard armors, you'll be glad you had the extra strength, and because you don't care about the AP, right? And Death Guard, whilst not doing well tournament rankings wise, are still a very common army. I can't tell you enough, guys. Just because they're not doing well in rankings, don't just look at the win rate. Look at the player count. You'll always find there's a good amount of Death Guard players at every tournament, every week. Anyway, back to Chimeras. You've got 3 for the multi-laser. You've got 3 for the heavy bolter. You've got 3 for the heavy stubber, or 2 for the storm bolt. We'll average it out at 3 for now, okay? That's 9 shots, and then you've got 6 for your lasguns. That's 15 shots. That's 15 shots. That is plenty of Hammer of the Emperor potential. You're looking at least 2. If you get a lucky burst, you're looking at 3 or 4. Okay? Then you get the Chimera up close and personal, which you're going to want to do. Why would you want to get the Chimera up close and personal? Because it's a transport. It's more than likely, if you're running a mechanized list and you've got Leman Russes and a Manticores at back, what do you think is going to be up front? It's going to be your Chimeras. Because your Chimeras, when you're taking a heavy mechanized list, like a classic Steel Legion list, your Chimeras fill the role of your screening units. You don't just have 60 infantry, you have 60 infantry and 6 Chimeras at your screening stuff. So more than likely, you're going to have your Chimeras up close and personal. So when we get up close and personal, let's look at how many shots we get now. 3 for the multi-laser, 3 for the bolter, that's 6. Then you're going to get 4 for your storm bolters, that's 10. And then you're looking at 12 lasgun shots. That's 22 shots. That's 22 shots. That is fantastic. That is almost the same amount of shots. It's pretty close. It's only 6 less than a Dakar Prime. A Dakar Taurox Prime. Okay? Hell, if you're taking the Taurox Prime with autocannons on the side and Gatling gun, it's only 2 shots less, right? Anyway, let's say it's 6 shots less. It's only 6 less shots, but you've got Hammer of the Emperor, which makes up for your crappy ballistic skill. I haven't done the maths, but let's try and work it out roughly. If you've got 28 shots from a Dakar Prime, you're looking at 2/3 of those are going to hit. So let's say 19 or so hit. Then you're looking at none of them auto wound. Then you've got a wound. Now, if you're shooting at at best you're going to be wounding on 4s, right? Because you're only showing 4 across the board. But you could quite easily find yourself wounding on 5s, right? So if only a third of them wound, you're only looking at like what, 6 or 7 wounds. Even if you're being generous, say you're wounding on 4s, you're looking at like 10 wounds. Okay, fine, fair enough. Like 6, let's say it's between 6 and 10 wounds. Look at the Chimera. Now it only hits with like half of its shots. Okay, you're gonna hit with like 10. But out of those 22 shots, 4 of them are gonna auto wound straight away. 3 to 4 of them are gonna auto wound straight away. Okay, so minimum, if you're shooting into any strength target, any tough target, it doesn't really matter. You're already wounding. You've already got 4 auto wounds. That's whether it's a knight. That's whether it's anything T5 or above, anything T2, doesn't matter. You've got 4 auto wounds. So straight away, if you're shooting a Torx Prime into a knight, you're shooting Chimera into a knight, just on the auto wounds alone, it's already almost got the same amount of wounds as it's got more wounds than a Torx Prime. If you're shooting into something that's toughness 7 or less, it's got 4 out of the 6 that Torx Prime's likely to get. Alright? And then you're like, okay, well, I've still got these other hits. I've still got 7 more hits after this. If I'm shooting into a knight, I'm likely to get 2 more wounds, right? If it's between the, because a lot of it's going to be heavy bolters and multi-lasers. Let's say you get 2 more wounds out of everything else. That's 6 wounds. You've just got the same amount of wounds, and this is very much napkin math, Hammer guys. It's very much top of my head, back of a cigarette packet, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure someone else will do the numbers. But what I'm saying is, if you're shooting into a high toughness target, then the Chimera should do a similar amount of wounds to a Torx Prime, but it's going to do it for 50 points cheaper, 40 points cheaper. It's mad. 28 shots, you're going to hit 28 shots, 20 hits, being generous, 6 wounds. You get the same thing for the Chimera. Yet one is so much cheaper. So this is what I'm talking about, Chimeras. It's because of Hammer of the Emperor. That it almost, for me, Hammer of the Emperor feels like my vehicle's now basically hitting on 3s as standard. That's the same amount of damage as I'm getting. When I shoot a Chimera at an enemy unit, I get the same amount of damage out of it as if I was shooting 2 or 3 sets of sponsons from my Lehman Russ tank commanders. It's the same kind of thing. 2 sets of sponsons cost basically the same as a Chimera, a little bit less. And then you can't forget, you do have the infantry squad inside. You see, what I've been doing with my Chimeras recently, and I found this is a lot of firepower. Okay, you don't just look at the Chimera on its own. You look at the full package, and you're like, okay, I've got an infantry squad in there with a heavy bolter, plasma gun, plasma pistol bolt. Doesn't really matter. I've got an infantry squad in there, and what happens is I'm looking at a unit now which is what. It's way less than 150 points. It's like 138 points. 138 points. It's like 18 more than a Torx Prime. It's nothing. It's not much. Or fair enough. You want to slap like a platoon commander there as well. So you're looking at about like 160 points. Okay. For 160 points, you have the platoon commander who can stay in the Chimera whilst his men jump out. And suddenly you've got all of those shots from the Chimera. As I said, like 22 shots from the Chimera. And then you've got the squad. Now, the platoon commander inside, you spend a CP. And he gets to do an order out of the Chimera to the infantry squad. And you could do this twice as well. Think about it. Because, you can spend an order to do the mobile command vehicle. And then you can do an extra order as well. As far as I'm aware, you can stack them. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you could have 2 infantry squads doing this. 2 Chimeras, a single platoon commander jumps out. He gives them all extra shots, and before you know it, you've got hundreds of shots pouring out of this infantry squad. You've got, if you just take lasguns, you've got 36 lasgun shots from the infantry squad, plus the Chimera. You're looking at like 50 plus shots, 60 shots. It's a lot. Now you're looking at 10 auto wounds. All of this in like a 160 point package, and you're just slamming on the auto wounds, guys. That's what you're doing. You're just taking the Hammer of the Emperor and we're abusing it for as long as we can, because either it's going to go into the Codex or they're going to get rid of it. So either make use of it whilst you can, or get used to being able to use it. However you slice it, you want to be smashing that hand with the Emperor. And that's how Chimeras are doing so well. People aren't ready for them. They're going to be ahead of the CP curve, and they are very good, cost-effective units for taking advantage of Hand of the Emperor. They put out a fantastic number of shots for their price point. And again, you don't care that some of those shots are strength 3. You don't care that some of those shots haven't got any AP. You don't care. For Imperial Guard now, the game is all about number of shots that can get you as much Hand of the Emperor as possible, and that can be anti-meta. And if the meta is slice the infantry apart at the moment, then you're going to want to consider things like Chimeras. The big thing here, though, guys, is just boiling it down, totally boiling it down. For me, the big thing that I've found has been catching people out has been the fact I've just been able to take so many vehicles. So many. This is really what it comes down to. This is what I'm going to summarise on. So many people at the moment are not taking enough anti-tank. So many people are relying on volume of fire to kill tanks. And sometimes that'll work. Sometimes that'll just work. And that'll be great. But sometimes if you can fire all the shitty shots you want, but I had that game last tournament where I just couldn't get through a 2-up save. Yeah, I statistically should have, but I just couldn't get through a 2-up save. So, this is our power armor. This is our Terminator spam. This is how we do it. We don't get Terminators, but we do get these units. And it is a really, really strong unit. And you add in the fact you've got Cadian as well. I've been running my Steel Legion. I've had a game of them as Steel Legion and I had a game of them as Cadian. And in both games, I noticed the power boost from Cadian straight away. It's so big taking your army as Cadian now over any of the regiment. But even so, still really good. It just comes down to armor overload. And even if they tag you in combat, you don't care. They want to tag you in combat, you just stay in combat. And you just shoot into combat with your vehicle. And you don't care if you might as well take, because what are you doing? You're fishing for 6s. That's what you're doing. Or you're taking double heavy flamer Chimera ones. But I think then you start getting a bit, it sounds crazy, but I would keep the Chimera. I'd aim to keep the Chimeras under, 80 points or under. I don't want a 90-point Chimera or anything like that. It sounds crazy, but for me, it's cheap at 78 points and it's expensive above that. I've got, 6 Chimeras with double heavy bolter and a heavy stubber, and I'm looking to swap those heavy bolter turrets out for multi-laser storm bolter turrets. That's what I'm looking to do, and to save myself 12 points. It's big when you do that. You save 12 points across the board with your 6 Chimeras. You're looking at 60 points. You're looking at almost another 3 Chimera there. No more, 72 points. That is that's basically a free Chimera. So it's really, really, really good. So we're going to call it there, guys. Let me know what you think about this video. Do you think Chimeras are back in business? Have you guys noticed similar trends in your meta, or are you still loving that pure infantry line? I think Guard at the moment are surprisingly okay. I think we're in a weirdly okay position where we're just sort of hanging around between a 40 and 50% win rate, and we're kind of, we're never going to Barney with the absolute top dogs, but I feel like we're kind of climbing those tiers to the point where we're almost mid-tier now. Bottom mid. I think we've gone from bottom to bottom mid. That's where I think we are now, guys. We've got so many sticking plasters, so many tools in the toolbox. I think that's where we are now. And Chimeras, I think, are a really good example of how Guard armies now can it's not just going down one route. You've got multiple routes that can be effective. But what do you guys think? What do you guys think? Think I'm absolutely mad, or do you think that I could be on something here? If you've enjoyed today's video, please consider giving it a like and a subscribe. If you've really enjoyed today's video and you want to see me talking about more crazy listings, and not just see me talking about them, but see me using them on the tabletop, consider going the extra mile and signing up and becoming a channel member or a Patreon supporter. It really does make a huge difference. This channel simply wouldn't be here without the generous support from the channel members and the patrons. And I want to say a huge thank you to my channel members, and to my Patreon supporters. You guys are absolutely fantastic. You guys know how much I appreciate it. I can't say it enough. I can't make a big enough deal out of it. Massive thank you to everyone who's watched this video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.